Shalom to all our viewers and friends. As we approach Tisha B'Av at the end of 3 weeks of mourning for the destruction of the temple, I would like to focus into one message that I think that we can take from these days. The Mishnah teaches us that throughout Jewish history, some days have a special, historical, spiritual charge that continues through generations. For example, on the 17th of Tammuz, not only were the walls of Jerusalem destroyed, but that is also the time that Moshe Rabbeinu broke the Luchot HaBrit after Am Yisrael sinned with building the golden calf. Tisha B'Av is not only the day that the temple was destroyed, it is also the day that Am Yisrael got the punishment to not go into Eretz Yisrael because of Chet HaMeraglim. And I think that the connection that the Mishnah makes between the sins of the generation of the Midbar and the sins and the historical times in which the temple was destroyed can teach us an important lesson. First of all, the breaking of Luchot HaBrit resembled a message that Am Yisrael does not deserve the Torah, but they got a second chance. They got Luchot Shneim. But when they sinned again, and they spoke bad words about Eretz Yisrael, there wasn't a second chance. That generation did not go into Eretz Yisrael. Also, in the generation of the destruction of the temple, the breaking of the walls of Jerusalem resembles incoming destruction of the temple. But there still was a chance that the temple might not be destroyed. But when Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, there is no going back for that generation. On a deeper level, I think we can learn from the sins of the generation of the Midbar to understand the connection between those days and the days of the destruction of the temple. The sin of the golden calf, Chet HaEgel, comes after a spiritual, godly, elevated experience of Ma'amad Har Sinai, Matan Torah, an experience in which Am Yisrael on the earth heard God speaking to them, revealing himself to them. The hearing of a godly, elevated voice speaking to Am Yisrael on earth could be an experience of shlemut, of chibur ben shamayim va'aretz, connection between heaven and earth. But it also is a big challenge for Am Yisrael. It's a challenge for them to fathom their ability to receive a godly call here on earth. And when Am Yisrael is in distress, when they are waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu, they choose to fulfill their need to connection to God, to their Avodat Hashem, in a very earthly way, in a very gashmi way, in a tangible way of a golden calf. They are unable to fathom that the connection to God comes from a deep spiritual feeling and not from the ability to hold something tangible, to touch something tangible, for there to be a thing that they can worship. We see this challenge to connect earth and heaven, spirituality and realism, also in the sin of the Meraglim. When the Meraglim go into Eretz Yisrael and they see only the bad things, our sages teach us that is because that they wanted to stay in the Midbar. They wanted to stay in the spiritual atmosphere of the Midbar without needing to work in the land, without needing to produce their own food. They preferred an atmosphere in which they have man min hashamayim. God is looking for all their earthly needs, and they can focus on their spirituality, on their connection to God. They are frightened that when they go into Eretz Yisrael, they will all be busy with working in the land, with building, with fighting, and they won't be able to focus on the spirituality. God has promised them that they'll be able to go into Eretz Yisrael and keep this connection. That the Torah is what teaches us to make this connection between earth and heaven, between earth and God. But Am Yisrael can't fathom it. And God must punish them, that generation that heard Anochi Hashem Elokecha in Har Sinai, that generation that heard God revealing himself in Har Sinai to Am Yisrael, won't be the generation that goes into Eretz Yisrael. Both the sin of the Meraglim and the sin of the golden calf resemble the struggle between heavenly ideals, between spirituality and being rooted in earthly reality. Also, the generation of the destruction of the temple experiences a similar struggle. The temple resembles spirituality in connection to God. Miracles occur in the temple. The fire comes from heaven down to burn the korbanot. On Yom Kippur, people would stand all crowded and be able to bow down on the ground. There would suddenly be miraculously more space. But with all the miracles in the Beit HaMikdash, with all spirituality in Beit HaMikdash, it doesn't manage to create an effect on Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael still sin with Gilui Arayot, Shfichut Damim, and Avodah Zarah, and in the second temple with the sins of Ben Adam Lechavero. How does the temple not manage to create a spirituality within Am Yisrael? And it could be that what happens is that Am Yisrael creates a separation. There's spirituality and there's ongoing life. Like the Navi'im all teach us, that Am Yisrael on one hand is bringing korbanot, but on the other hand not treating appropriately the widows and the orphans and the weak people in the society. The society in itself isn't moral. People are not worshipping God out of Beit HaMikdash. But within Beit HaMikdash, they're happy to meet spirituality. They're happy to meet God, what I would say in our life, in shul, but not in real life, not in business. And Am Yisrael, in that situation, basically has a temple that is a lie. It isn't really bringing spirituality to Am Yisrael. And that's what our sages say, Bait charu v'charavta. The Beit HaMikdash was already destroyed. It existed, but it wasn't creating an effect on Am Yisrael. And when Beit HaMikdash has no say anymore, people see Beit HaMikdash as a transcendent spiritual experience that doesn't affect their life, doesn't have a call that goes through their whole life. So the Beit HaMikdash is not doing its job. Beit HaMikdash is not resembling the call of God that should be heard from Beit HaMikdash out to our life. And therefore, Beit HaMikdash must be destroyed. Am Yisrael now have to find a way to worship God without a Beit HaMikdash, because it is not doing its job. And they will be missing something. They will be missing the godly spiritual connection with God that can only happen in Beit HaMikdash. In these days when we want to build Beit HaMikdash, we must search to correct that mistake, to correct that sin. We want to worship God by listening to his call that comes from Har Sinai, that comes from Beit HaMikdash. The godly values we want to come and incorporate in our earthly lives. We don't want to build from our earthly lives a desire to God. We want to hear the godly call out of Beit HaMikdash, from Har Sinai, and from that go out to our lives and worship God within our earthly lives. Sometimes we feel a need for separation between Beit HaMikdash and our life, but that separation is not natural. God wants to reveal himself within our life, and we have to listen to that desire, to that voice that God says from Mount Sinai, to that big present that God gave us, the Mishkan, the Beit HaMikdash. And we have to try and build our spiritual life in this world from top to bottom, not from bottom to top. From bottom to top means that we'll build our life as we desire, and within it we will find values, we will find ways and paths to God. But building from top to bottom says that we walk around in our world, in our life, listening to God's call. We want to do God's commandments. We want to act as the people of God, people of the nation of God. And therefore, we ask God, we ask the Torah, what does God command us? What voice are we supposed to hear from Beit HaMikdash? From the spiritual level that God reveals himself, from the spiritual voice that God is calling in the world. And we ask, what is my call? What is the call of Am Yisrael? And from that call, we then go out to worship God in our world. Gadol Talmud shemevi lidei maaseh. On the door of our Beit Midrash, we have the sentence that the Talmud is greater because it calls us to actions in this world. The Talmud, the Limud Torah, is our listening to God's desire in this world, and out of that we want to come and worship God in our world, in a world that we want to hear God's voice. We want spirituality, and we're not afraid that spirituality will be too transcendent and too separated for us from this world. We will be worthy of the building of Beit HaMikdash. Our steps towards Geulah are in our ability to incorporate heaven and earth, spirituality and earthliness, in our choice to learn Torah and go to the army, to learn Torah, daven in shul, and also work, and also build the world, build Eretz Yisrael, build Am Yisrael. We are trying to make that connection, and that connection is the key for being worthy for Beit HaMikdash, in which God reveals himself in a earthly world with korbanot, with earthly korbanot, with silver and gold, but with a spiritual internal voice. As we approach Tisha B'Av, I hope, I wish, I pray that Am Yisrael, that I will be able to hear God's voice and incorporate it in our world. May God reveal himself and build the Beit HaMikdash and give us the opportunity to feel the full connection between spirituality and earthliness. May we be worthy for seeing the Beit HaMikdash, for the Geulah Shlema bimhera b'yameinu.